Hello, fellow note investor. Dave Putz here. And this week, Nathan Turner and I sit down together to talk about some of the myths of note investing and some of the facts. Some are not as black and white as that is. And we talk about how much money you need to get started. And while you're through the process of buying notes, how do you know what the outcome is going to be? Is there factual truth that you know what's going to happen when it happens? Vacancy, is that a good thing or bad thing? Is self-servicing a positive or negative? And we also talk about really good in-depth math calculations from ROI to yield to net present value. So definitely tune in, watch the whole thing, and feel free to send us any comments, questions you may have. Enjoy. Well, welcome everyone. Dave Putz from JKP Holdings. Alongside me, Mr. Nathan Turner.
Hello, hello.
Everything is going well.
It's going well. It's going well. I am in the middle of updating the DME website. If you go to it now, you're going to see it halfway finished. More information coming. It's pretty exciting. It's good stuff. So keep checking back.
So I apologize everyone for the technical thing. I'm so used to setting up for 3 people, and I wasn't. So hopefully all is well. I appreciate it. I see some people texting and messaging, all that good stuff and whatnot. So what we want to do is get started with everyone and kind of catch up for a minute, because I'm realizing recently that bankruptcy things are starting to open up. Deals are trying to change. Again, from last week, we had 3 other BKs that actually started processing out of the blue. And we're waiting about, I don't know, 18 months for one of them that just did not make a payments. Deal flow, we're seeing more of it.
Are you seeing more?
Yep, we're seeing a lot more now. I'm seeing people want to move things. Pricing hasn't changed too much yet, but I think we're on the way.
I think so too. I've seen deal flow. It's been more from some people and less from others, and so it's been a little bit different than has been in the past, but it's still certainly there. Yeah.
So we got a few people checking in before we get started. Jay saying hi. Also, Larry. I see Cindy, everyone else. So I appreciate everyone. I'm going to mute my phone for a minute. I appreciate everyone kind of jumping in and checking out what we got going on today.
Yeah.
I have been closing out a few more deals. We were in the process of buying a pool of assets. They trickled down eventually when reading the collateral file. So they're not as crisp as we want to be. And we can get everything, but we did get a bunch, which is really cool.
Write that one down.
What are you seeing now? I know we're looking at when we were talking last, you're looking at some reverse mortgages and whatnot. What's been on your horizon?
Yeah, I've got another pool of reverse mortgages that I'm looking at right now. I'm still raising capital, and so I'm getting very close to my goal for this month, which is great, and because we're only a week in. But that's really good. Spending some time here updating for DME coming up in June. I know it's a little ways off, but I'll send out a big announcement, something a little later today. We've got our class that we're starting up for 5-week, which is pretty exciting as well. And man, lots going on. It's been very good.
So if you're kind of new to this whole area of note investing, what you're going to find from a lot of this conversation we're having today is note investing has a lot of curiosities to it, right? A lot of people wondering what it's all about, but there are also a lot of ideas out there that people don't realize are what you think they may be, but you're not sure, everything else. So well, our mission today was to really kind of talk to everyone about some of the big time myths out there and some of the not so myths, some of the facts out there. And we want to really kind of dive into those kind of factors because I think what we're going to find is some of the stuff out there is a myth per se, but there's some truth to as well.
Yeah. So, and this is going to be interesting because Dave and I, we didn't discuss this beforehand. So we're
purposely
he's got his list, I've got my list, and we're just going to kind of hit each other with what we've got. So
Yeah.
this should be kind of fun and entertaining. We'll see what kind of myths we come across and what off our lists are the same and what's different. So this will be interesting to see how this goes.
Oh, boy. I thought my Zoom is acting up today, so hopefully we won't have too many issues, but I'll make sure we get some things happen here. So. All right. Come on. There we go. That's better. Holy moly.
Yeah.
So we wanted to talk about myths because I think people out there really don't have a grasp of some of the big essences of note investing and what they really mean.
Yeah.
Because when you talk about note investing, there's a lot of curiosity out there that are just not true. And I struggle with that because when you talk about notes in general, it's complicated space. When you add things in there that may not be fully what you think they should be, they become even more complicated and not true.
Yeah.
So
what's your first one? What's
we want to talk? Yes. So what we want to talk about first is talking about getting into note investing, and having money, right? There's a idea that in real estate, you have to have a lot of money, 20% down, these kind of things to buy properties. And what you find out that you typically don't need as much in notes as you do in brick and mortar, right? 20% down if you want to fix it up. Rentals, you need to go get a good mortgage, everything else. Where notes, you don't need a lot to get started.
You don't. However, actually, Cindy and I were both on a call yesterday where this came up, where you don't need a lot, but you do need cash. And you can't, there's no lending on notes, not really. There's some, again, maybe I just created another myth. There's not any lending on notes. That's not necessarily true, but you're not going to be able to go get a mortgage to go and buy notes or a line of credit from a bank to go and buy notes. That doesn't exist.
Correct.
However, but you do have to have cash because it moves a lot faster in a lot of ways than real estate.
Yes.
Where you're putting in an offer on with real estate, you can take your time and closing doesn't happen for a month or longer. Whereas in notes, you're expected to be able to close. In most cases, you're looking at closing like within a week. So you've got to have your cash ready to go on the spot and close when you say you're going to close.
Sure.
That's a big deal. So
if you guys do have issues hearing us at all, let us know, or seeing us. We'll do our best to do our tracking, our comments and whatnot. I would definitely tell you guys, if you are watching us on any feed, primarily we're looking at the Facebook group feed for comments. Feel free to jump in there, but we are on LinkedIn and the Facebook page and whatnot. So getting started with notes, definitely there's a money attribute to this, right? There is a field where money is needed. However, you know, you can find a decent deal for a low amount of money, as long as you're going for the assets that are desired around the low money.
Yes.
You know, we have IRA money, and I don't need $20,000 IRA money to get into a partial, right? Now, granted, if you're buying non-performers and you're going to buy one for 5,000, that's all you have, that's a problem.
That'll be a problem. That'll be an issue.
Yeah.
And why is that, Dave? Why is that a problem?
So you get into not performing, you have a lot of fees, a lot of extras, a lot of costs to come play with that. From servicing fees, you have to make sure that you're going to be funding that while you're not a performer. You're also going to be funding legal fees, demand letters, things like that. And if you're doing your IRA, well, what do you do with that money? Especially if it's a Roth, how would you come up with additional funds to handle the legal fees and the servicing fees and things like that? So,
and a lot of those things are fixed costs. So whether it's a note you bought for 5,000 or 500,000, those costs are going to be the exact same number, but percentage wise, that could wipe you out.
Yeah.
So I typically, I'll see what you say, Dave, but when people are asking me how much money do I need to get started in notes, typically I recommend around 50,000. If you've got about 50,000, that's a pretty good number to start with. You can get a decent note for that, plus have enough money left in reserve for all these costs that are involved.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think that the thought process of having no money at all is dangerous.
Yeah.
I do think that you can play with the 50,000 more successfully than if you were doing it strictly based on, the goal of, buying stuff and being non-passive, complete aggressive with stuff and making a business out of it. You need to have some money.
Yeah.
And be careful joint venturing with someone with money, because that can cause a problem eventually.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. 10
So-
years ago, it was a different number. 10 years
Yeah.
ago, I said probably you could start with around 30.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Because of those notes were more available, pricing was cheaper. A lot of things made that more possible.
Yes.
But in today's market, I'd say you're looking, minimum 50,000 to get started.
Yes. There's so many other things that now involved that they weren't before. So
Right.
cool. Yeah. Patrick made the comment about, property tax, forced place insurance, especially non-performing, et cetera, et cetera. Well said, Patrick.
Yeah.
So when we talk about this stuff, the reason we do this is because there's a lot of people out there that just don't realize what's going on. And then to get involved with stuff, it just doesn't make sense. So to remind everyone, if you do catching this late, we'll be on YouTube and all that good stuff, the podcast as well.
So that's another myth that leads right into another myth that I wrote down here is if you have been a real estate investor in the past, you can just move straight into notes.
Ooh, and why is that?
That's a big no-no. All kinds of reasons, but real estate, this is one of my catchphrases is it's real estate related, but it is not real estate. It's in that world. And it's related to real estate. We're buying something attached to real estate, but you're not buying the real estate.
Yes.
And ideally, and depending on your exit strategy and everything else, but having done this for a number of years now, I can tell you the best case scenario is you'll never own the property. Yes. That I know, even when I got started, I was after the property. I wanted to get the property. That seemed like a good way to get property. And it is, and it can be, but experience has taught me that your best case scenario is never to own it. That's really what you should be going after. It's, in my opinion, it's the best exit.
Absolutely. So, that's a good question that most people don't realize that they should be having it themselves, is that if you're ideally going for a property in a scenario, you're going to be having some issues because you can't predict what a borrower is going to do. Right. Don't predict the exit strategy before it comes. I know that when I first got started, that was one of the goals, like, okay, this is going to go this direction and this is going to happen. This is going to happen.
Yeah.
No.
And that's the thing, that you can have an idea of where you think it might go or a most likely case scenario, but when you're dealing with borrowers, especially, people are unpredictable and they do all kinds of weird things that you would never think of. And so be prepared for it to go off the rails outside of whatever plan you had for it. That was another one of mine, is everything always goes according to plan. No,
yes,
not at all.
We can all look at asset and say, this is probably going to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And we have a good feeling, but I wouldn't count on your feeling as an investment. That's more of a gamble than investment.
Right.
And feel free, if you guys have any ideas of myths or even facts that you're kind of curious, put it in the chat and we'll definitely check into it and talk about it. So when we talk about going from a property, going to real estate, it's hard to grasp the idea that you can't actually evaluate the property.
Yeah.
That you mean I can't look at the property, I can't check it out, I can't get inside of it before I buy it. That's really difficult for a lot of real estate investors.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And it's hard to say, well, but what if you just kind of snuck in, or what if you knocked on the door? No, don't do it. Don't do it. You're going to get in trouble.
Yes.
You might get away with it once or twice, but you're going to get in trouble. It's a bad idea. Don't do it. And just be prepared for that. You don't know the inside of the house. You don't know what it looks like. So be ready to be surprised.
Yes. So
and what I can say is, in all my years, and this is part of why I say you don't want the property. And I've been doing this a number of years now, since 2008. I could go back and look to be sure, but I think probably 90% or more of the time, if I've ever lost money on buying a mortgage note, which is not often, it doesn't happen very often, but if I ever do lose any money on it or don't make a profit, let's put it that way. If I ever don't make a profit, it's when I take back the property. I don't know that I've ever not made a profit in any other scenario.
We've never
going to go weird or off and,
the only scenario would go weird or off is if it goes to a foreclosure and you're really tight your numbers and you they file BK and they contest it and fight it. I've gotten expensive foreclosures, especially in like Florida, where they contest it. It takes a long time, and it's frustrating, right?
Real quick, I just had one just finally this week. These guys have been playing the game literally for 10 years. I didn't buy the loan that long ago, but they've been doing BK, this, that, and the other forever. Finally, the judge last month got fed up and converted their bankruptcy. It was a Chapter 11. It was under their corporation. He converted it to a Chapter 7, and then just this week they contested that, and the judge confirmed, nope, it's going Chapter 7. Too bad, so sad. They were doing all kinds of really stupid things in their bankruptcy, and thank heavens we finally are able to prevail on that one. But holy smokes, that one has been one for the books. I'll write a book about that one day.
That's nuts. So I'm curious, when people look at this stuff and they start looking at stuff like this, and we on our list, we're going to go jump around a little bit here. Don't predict the fact that the borrower, because it's vacant, that it's going to go one way or the other. Most people say, well, I only buy vacant. I only buy occupied. And one myth is the fact that I think it's a myth that just because it's occupied means that I'm going to get a reinstatement.
Right.
Or a modification. And it's a great win-win situation.
For sure. And vice versa. Just because it's occupied doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to take back that property. I've had it where I thought it was vacant and surprise, no, it wasn't. And vice versa. I've had it the other way around where I thought it was occupied and then it was vacant. Yeah. So you gather the best intel you've got, and then it goes whichever direction it's going to go. And it's really hard to predict.
So with that said, I think what most people don't realize is occupied, unoccupied, they can move back in a home. Yeah. Maybe they died, maybe they moved, or there's so many scenarios there that occupied equals this and not occupied means that. Here's the problem with non-occupied. Is it habitable? Is it a good property? Or is it destroyed? Which we've run into many times in the background.
Yeah. And is it occupied? Okay, great. Is it the owner occupying that? Is there a renter in there? Is it a squatter in there? So what does occupied mean? Just because you sent my Google's trying to talk to me. Just because it's occupied doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a reinstatement. Like you say, Dave, like it could be occupied by somebody other than the owner. Maybe the owner, I had this where the owner passed away and then it was an heir living there. They didn't actually have the right to live there, but they just kind of moved in. So it was occupied, but not by the correct person. And I mean, you get all kinds of fun and interesting stories that happen. So you can't assume, I think that's the bottom line. You can't assume that it's just because of these factors in the beginning, you can't assume that it's going to end up in this situation.
And I want to make sure people understand that is that don't predict anything before you get into it. That's a big myth.
Yeah.
Next was, you talk about foreclosing, you're going to do something when it happens, even if it's in foreclosure. Yeah. Don't predict the fact you're going to go to auction. Can't.
Oh, good one.
So let's jump around here. Or occupied by a renter. Well said, Cindy. So let's flip here for a second, just for a second here. Let's say that the loan is performing. Yeah. Right. It's going to continue to perform. right?
Forever and ever.
We hear sellers all the time say it has 12 months, 24 months of seasoning.
Right.
So
Right.
what investors typically do is they bid, we'll get into the bidding ideas. They'll bid this based on a performing thing and say, lock key, done.
Right. And so I think it was Dr. Phil that said the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So are they going to continue to make payments if they've made 12 consecutive payments? Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. At least for the next, few months, probably.
And let's not deviate from the situation. Is not that they decide to. It could be
Right.
all different reasons why. They can lose a job all of a sudden. They can get sick, die, anything. We've had loans where borrowers stop making payments simply to allow their kid to go to college.
Right. Yeah, I had one where I quit making payments because they were paying for their daughter's wedding. The list is endless. So there's all kinds of reasons why people don't make payments, but that happens all the time. So be prepared. That's kind of the moral of that. Be prepared for it to go non-performing. Make sure that you've purchased it at a reasonable price so that if it does go non-performing, you're not hung out to dry.
Yeah. So looking at our list a little bit more to see what we got going on here. We want to talk about note investing being passive.
Yes.
It's a huge myth per se.
Yeah.
Is it a full myth or is it partially factual at all?
So that's one that I had on my list as well, is once it's performing, you give it to or even if it's non-performing, you give it to the servicer will take care of everything. Kind of. And here's the thing, I don't mean to give servicers a bad rap at all. Nope. I think that's a very difficult job.
Yep.
You've got, hundreds, thousands of loans that you're dealing with. You've got hundreds of different investors with all different kind of expectations and, ideas of where they would like this note to go. Like it's a really tough job for a servicer to kind of manage everything and make sure that everybody's happy all the time. I think it's a near impossible job. So that being said, then you've got a servicer where, here, give you a scenario. So let's say that I've got a loan, let's call it a non-performing loan. I've got a non-performing loan. It's occupied. The guy hasn't made a payment for 18 months, let's say. Where do I want that one to go? Do I want that one to reperform? Am I more interested in taking back a property? What is my investor looking for out of this note, and at what and when? There's all kinds of factors in there. So when a servicer gets that note, their thinking might be, we're going to do everything we can to get it reperforming.
Yep.
Well, I also know the history of this note, and the guy hasn't made a payment for 18 months. He'd made payments for 3 months. And then for 2 years before that, he hadn't been making payments. And he had 2 bankruptcies in the last 5 years and. So my strategy on that one may not be actually to get him reperforming. In most cases it is, but let's just, for the outlier, let's say that in this case, I actually would rather just be done with it and take back a property. So if the person comes back and wants to make a partial payment, the servicer in that situation might be like, oh yeah, that's great, everything we can do to get them reperforming. Whereas my thing might be, full reinstatement or nothing. And that's the way it's going to be. And so it makes it very difficult. So when you're talking about totally passive, I think that's nearly impossible.
Yes.
Unless you've got a massive portfolio and then you just do let the servicer do what they're going to do, and the averages are in your favor. And that's how you do it.
I think you make a good point, right? Services is our hurdle times, but also our savior times, right?
Yeah.
They avoid us having to do this full time.
Yeah.
At times, right? Even the mass scale, big time investors rely on the servicers to do a lot of the work.
Absolutely.
So,
and you should.
Yes. But granted, we understand the fact that not all servicers care about the asset as much as we do.
Yeah.
Can't. It's our asset. right? So the passive side can be things such as a performing note that's going great and not worrying about it at all.
Right.
So can this be passive? Yes.
Yeah.
No worries. If it performs forever, like a great renter, right? That performs forever or performs to a point where they pay it off. That makes sense.
Great.
Right.
And you're definitely going to have those, and like, not to say that those are, the unicorn that doesn't exist. Those absolutely exist. They absolutely exist. So if you can get yourself a portfolio where that's all it does, then absolutely it can be totally hands-off, passive. You don't have to do a thing.
And if you buy a partial, that's the other side of it. Usually partial is passive until it's not.
Yeah, good point.
Right. So we're going to skip one because it's a little bit of math with doing it. But we're talking about servicing, right? And in our list looking down is self-servicing. It's easy. There's nothing to it. There's people out there who say you're crazy for hiring a servicer. You can do it all yourself.
Yep.
Can you service yourself? And is that easy?
All right. So I've got a really good friend, lives down in Texas, and he has his own portfolio. He's got, I don't know, a couple of hundred loans that he services all himself. Guy makes a bundle of money, and he's a great guy, and I love him to death. And I aspire to be like him one day, except for the self-servicing part. It's a lot of work, man. Like, even just one aspect. Let's talk about escrow. If you're collecting escrow to pay for taxes and insurance, that kind of thing, you're going to have to keep that separate. Not only do you have to keep it separate, you have to keep meticulous records of exactly what is in escrow, when, taxes were paid, insurance was paid, and how much. Are there any adjustments to be made because the tax bill went up or down? Like, just that alone, you're talking about on one loan. And then you've got to do that how many times? 10, 20, 100 times? Sure. It can get to be a huge job, just that part of it.
And when you first get in this space, never self-service.
Agreed. Yeah.
You have no clue what you can't do. It's not like getting a private loan to somebody and calling them up and say, I want my money.
Right.
There's so many regulations in the space that the servicers handle for us. Unless you have a good idea, I wouldn't speak to the borrower yourself either.
Right.
You're walking on fire there. Can you always get in trouble? No, there are ways to prevent yourself from being in trouble. However, you don't know those ways. You don't know what you can and can't say, and you don't realize what trouble you can get into. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So self-servicing is, once you get it cracking, you only have a portfolio small or in performing. Yes, you can self-service and make it happen and save yourself $15, $20, $30 a month.
Especially if you're talking about like one local area. So my friend in Texas, he's in Lubbock. Everything he has is an hour's drive of Lubbock. So it's all same county, same state, same rules, and he knows them very well inside and out. And so he can do that. If you're talking about having loans in Texas, and then in Michigan, and then in Tennessee, and then in North Carolina, you're talking about different rules and different things you can and can't do. It gets dicey. Yeah.
So before we go to the next one, we want to remind everyone, those people who are beginners / getting to the point of advance and learning these myths are really cool. We do have a 5-week course that's going to be coming up on the 23rd of October. Be 5 individual weeks. Each week we'll be building on the next. Homework, tons of resources. Take a look at the website for more details. I can post a link below. What we'll be doing is, on a weekly basis, you'll be going through actual assets and figure out issues and problems and questions and have homework. We'll provide resources such as statute limitations and timelines and licenses and stuff like that we've never shared before. So if you can bring a partner for half off. So if you are interested in getting involved with this and getting really actually in advance, we'll be covering due diligence and whatnot. Please take a look at the website, sign up. If you have any problems, reach out to us and we'll jump on that.
Yeah, this is very practical, very hands-on. So definitely get involved. Yeah.
You're going to go through assets, and we're going to give you homework such as find the problem. Right? We know the problem. You're going to dive into it and going to be handed a whole file, collateral file, or you'll be reaching out to actual local agents. You're gonna be doing things like that to get your hands dirty and get your hands a little messy. But we'll be sharing resources that we've never shared before, and the information will be priceless, I promise you.
Yeah.
We're really excited about this opportunity.
Yeah, get on board. It's gonna be great.
So we talked about a lot of the foreclosures getting involved. We have another issue that I see. I find to be a myth. Some people find to be helpful. And I was just talking to someone just last night, is understanding the math behind notes.
Yeah.
Right. Can I calculate everything in a way that we calculate, a rehab project or whatnot? Some people do ROI. Some people do how long until I get my money back.
Right.
Right. Some people say, well, how much over my percentage of borrowed money?
Yeah, and Tom Henderson talks about this quite a bit. We had him on a few months back and talks about this all the time. And he talks about yield is something that's realized when the money comes in. Anything that you put on paper, that's a projected income.
Yes.
It's not money until it's money in your account.
Yeah.
So it's all fine and good to make projections, but you don't make the money until it actually comes in.
Yes. So I think what most people don't realize about that is that you can do all the math you want, and things change, right?
And not to say you shouldn't do the math, because you definitely should.
Yes.
But be prepared for twists and turns.
Yeah. And I think what people don't realize when they're doing the math is, well, that math seems to be a little too difficult. So I'm going to go a little bit easier. ROI is one of the basic terms that I used to use. I used to use it a lot.
Yeah.
However, what you find out with it is if I do a P&I times 12 divided by purchase price to figure out if my return's good,
right,
you clearly take out the entire note process of it, right? Because it may not be 12 months, it may be 24, 50 months, 60 months. And that's great and wonderful, but you're dividing a month angle by a purchase price. There's reinstatement come and play in there, just servicing fees that increase, decrease based on things like that. So please be sure that if you're calculating based on ROI, that you understand what the math is. If you're using it on a basis is great.
Yeah.
The other point is yield. A lot of people continue to use a yield calculation. You can use a calculator. We have a workshop that allows you to figure out yield in the spreadsheet where you can run 100 assets through it and figure out a purchase price on an X yield, which is great.
Yeah.
Nathan, when you first got started, what did you bid based on? Besides, okay, let's get real quick, another myth out there. Please don't bid based on UPB or BPO. If you taught that, reach out. We'll explain why it's bad, because it leaves everything of the note out of place. You have no interest rate in there, which means you have no clue what the P&I is.
Yeah.
And just because the UPB is 50,000 and you bid based on 50,000, and you're hoping that the return's good, it's dangerous. However, we used to do that. So when you first got started, what did you do?
So when I first got started, you got to go back in time a little bit, because when I first got started, everything was underwater. Everything.
Yes.
Like there was never any equity, is what I'm saying. So if the house was worth 100, they owed 150 or 125 at least. Every loan, they without exception. So in that case, bidding based on whatever the payoff was or whatever the unpaid balance was made 0 sense, because the house wasn't worth as much as that. So the chances of you collecting that were completely zero. Like there's no way you were ever going to, collect 150,000 on a house worth 100.
Yeah.
So that just didn't work. So back in the day, it was always based on property value. And then that was the main thing. And again, going way back when I very first started, I was always after the property. So my strategy at the time was I only bought distressed loans on vacant properties, and only in Columbus, Ohio, as in one city.
We all started in Columbus.
Yeah, yeah. It's a good place. But that was a strategy. So either I was going to foreclose or get a deed in lieu. And that was like it. That was what I was after. So when I was bidding, it was always based on property value, whatever was left owing on the note. That actually just became something that I could use when I was talking to the borrower, where I'd say, hey, listen, you owe $150,000 on this. What I'm willing to let you do is walk away from that. So just sign this deed in lieu, give me the property, and it all goes away. We file this release of lien, and you don't owe that money anymore. And at the time, it worked great, and that was a good strategy.
This idea of bidding at a percentage was because pricing was low back then.
Yes.
Right. I made jokes back in the day that if we bid above 40% of the UPB, that'd be ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right. So understand the fact that stair steps back then made a lot of sense because everything we did had a really high yield if we knew it or not. We didn't realize what we're doing because we didn't talk about that stuff. Right.
No, and we didn't really need to in a lot of
40%, 30%. I mean, you calculate any of the deals out there. I don't care if the 2% loan.
Yeah.
And you bid a 30% because you just didn't know any better.
Yeah. And then
how much return are you going to get?
Yeah. 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 That was a great time to get started because you could make all kinds of mistakes, and we sure did.
Yeah.
And we still came out okay. And that was great.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you have to know what you're doing.
So as we move forward, right, I started doing ROI and I started getting into yield and understand what yield does. And when I met one of my partners in 2016, we really dived into yield, and he explained it as a bond guy, what yield equates to. And I see some posts about this. And Larry, I love your idea. So what most people don't realize is that yield is based on an annual return until maturity date. It's a bond equation, right? If that bond equates to a maturity date in 30 years, your annual return over average will be X return.
Right.
What he explained to me, what he was surprised by is that I'm bidding everything based on a yield number or an IRR until maturity date.
Okay.
And what we then shifted to was, okay, what is the average loan time frame that we're going to hold it? The borrower is not going to refi or sell the property.
Right.
And what we realized, started feeling out, is that if we look at IRR or yield to maturity date, we're actually predicting that something that is very rarely happening. Most people sell the property, they refi out, all kinds of stuff happens. The default, whatever it is, and more likely they'll default before it happens.
Right.
Or sell the property.
Early payoff, whatever. Yeah.
Yep. Early payoff is a huge one, right? Yep. So what I would say is that what we did was we shifted from an IRR thing idea to a net present value number, which is a reverse of an IRR. So what we did was, and I was doing this a lot, was I would actually set my price and keep tweaking my bid price to get to the return I wanted versus start with the return and go based on net present value. So if you don't know what net present value is, definitely dive in. It's a very newer thing for me. So I'm not the expert on it, but I actually sat down with Tom and talked about this. And he said, listen, that's where you want to go. The other flip side is you should be predicting that either selling the note, borrow, refi out, borrow, sell the property is within a time period. And what you're going to find out is that ROI doesn't help calculate this. IRR doesn't help calculate this. What you need to do is do a schedule on every asset and say in 5 years, in 7 years, in 10 years, in 3 years, if I sell it at X dollars at that point, where will I be during that period of time?
Right.
So if I want to hold it for 5 years and I want to get X return, and then in 5 years, either I'm going to sell it or I'm going to X, whatever is going to happen, I want that return to be during that period of time, right? And this is done by a hedge fund guy and my bond partner, and figuring that out, which was a completely different mindset.
Yeah.
But it was the same conversation. We all say it, more likely we're not holding a loan for 20 years.
Right.
So when we figure a yield or IRR to the end of the schedule, we're actually lying to ourselves. And what we realized was that we can actually buy in lower yield to a seller, if they figure a yield them based on a number, our yield number is lower than our actual bid because our IRR internally for a 3-year or 10-year, whatever it is higher, but the yield is lower, which is really interesting math. So
Yeah.
yes, Larry, I see your point. NPV is a really cool idea. It reverses the IRR.
Yeah. And we had this conversation when I was getting the fund started and making sure, because mine is a 5-year fund. And so it's, what does that look like at the end of 5 years? And then one of the big questions to look at it when you're doing that is, okay, then how much can I sell that loan for 5 years from now?
Yes.
You know, at what percentage of, like, at what yield do I have to sell it at?
Yes.
In order to be able to, you know, like, back into it that way. So therefore I can spend this much on it today, knowing that in 5 years, I'll be able to sell it for X amount.
Yeah. And I see Patrick comment about this is all about time value money. Absolutely it is. However, if you use time value money yield and say, okay, what's my yield or IRR to maturity, you're missing out on the fact that if you sell it or something happens in 5 years, in 7 years, in 10 years, or 2 years, all those different scenarios should be played out because you don't know what's going to happen. And you most likely are probably overbidding and hoping for a high return, which means you lose out on assets and whatnot. So it's a really difficult math. But for exactly what Nathan's saying, for his fund, sunset of 5 years, even if there's 15 more years on it, he has to predict what he'll sell it for, most likely in yield number, right? And to know the fact that if I sell it at an X yield in 5 years, I'll get that as an income. So what will my IRR be over those 5 years, including that payment coming in? Right. So yes, I think it's a huge thing that most people don't get. It's complicated. So I apologize for that long-winded answer. But ROI is something I get. It's easy. How long to get your money back is a feel-good thing, right? And if you say, well, it's 5 years giving my money back. I always look to point if I had a rental property or a fix and flip, would ROI apply there? Would I be looking at different numbers? And remember, guys, you can figure out IRR on non-performing assets because the time value of money still works if you foreclose on a property. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I wanted to pivot for a minute, make sure if anyone has any kind of myths or ideas out there, please let us know. One of the things that came out to me recently is this conversation of what's going to happen in the future, right? The easy first myth is we don't know what's going to happen, right? Let's get over it. However, what we do know are some of the things that are affecting the current buyers and people who are involved. I would keep an eye on things like ARMs, how many percentage of ARMs are being created. Because ARMs, if someone can't afford something, they usually get an ARM. And then if that adjusts, what happens?
And HELOCs is another one to keep an eye out for, how many HELOCs are being created right now or have been created in the last 2 years. House prices are going up, free money's all over the place. There's all kinds of things you can buy. All of a sudden equity is being created when it wasn't there before. And people are making HELOCs happen where maybe they shouldn't have. But
we learned anything back in 06.
Right.
Yes. So Cindy made the comment, just be careful predictions in the future as inflation has direct correlation to real yield. Right. So a 10% return right now is great. However, if everything else goes up, that 10% drops down, right? You should be aiming for a little higher return if you can get it. And again, going back to that whole idea of schedule, and if anyone wants, I know Larry's probably jumping an idea, if figuring this out, this new schedule, you can literally buy a little higher return with a lower yield because of the way the equation figures out. So I wanted to bring up also due diligence. Due diligence is a big factor that most people want to learn about, but struggle. And I've seen this post on a couple different Facebook groups. My team has brought this up to me as well. No one's going to do your due diligence for you.
Right. And the question of how much do you do? How much can you hire out? How much is too much if there is such a thing? how do you handle due diligence on a small scale and on a larger scale? And that's a good one, that somebody else will do it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get, so the question is, what do the big dogs do, right? We're friends with some of the bigger players and stuff like that. They do have teams that handle things.
Right.
Understand the fact that they collateral file can be reviewed by an attorney or collateral management company. Get all that.
Yeah.
Your value of property is just, we've talked about that a lot, right?
Yeah.
Larry uses an attorney for all due diligence. I do too. I have one generic attorney, unless it's state specific, and I really have a question about something, they'll go to an attorney inside that state. You can hire big management companies who can review things and take a look at it. And there are companies out there who will review all the collateral files for you. They're not attorneys, they can figure it out, right? Missing the name off the top of my head right now out in California, but they'll take on clients, will review collateral files, and they're vast in the entire country.
But the bottom line, you've got to have human eyes on it.
Yes.
It can't be done by, electronic means, not fully. There's going to be a person there that knows what they're doing, that's looking at it. Even a VA, if they're specifically trained to be able to go through and see a collateral file and know what it means, okay, great. Most aren't.
No.
And so just be aware.
And there's little caveats that most people will miss on it, right? We saw a file the other day where the forbearance agreement wasn't signed by the seller.
Right.
Is that a legitimate forbearance agreement if both parties didn't sign it, right? There's always little things. On the flip side, things like your value of your property, you can order BPO, or you can talk to an agent, which can't be automated. You got to reach out to the agent, talk to them. Reading over servicing notes, I highly recommend you do.
Yeah, agreed.
Understand the pay history, but service notes is a huge thing. It's your eyes on the property. It's like you're getting inside the property.
Yeah.
You're getting eyes and ears into the borrower situation. And if you don't know what's going on with it, the service notes give you a lot of insight.
Yeah. It's so valuable to know the story. So if they've been struggling with payments, okay, why? And if you got the servicing notes, you get a lot of those conversations that come through. Or not. Maybe all you see is the servicer has tried to reach out 20 times over the last 2 months and just has zero response. But you got it. Like, if you know that, whatever it is, you can start to put together the story a little bit and then figure out where do you go from here.
Just to bring up some of the things I've seen over the years in servicing notes, a modification we've talked about before, what a big seller I know, I bought a loan for, a modification was getting in the process of. House was on fire.
Wow.
Right? What happened? The borrower called, the house on fire. I want to know what happened to fire damage.
Yeah.
Right? Was it repaired? Was the money paid out?
Yeah.
Was the work done? Do we have pictures of that work?
Yeah.
Those kind of things.
Another
big one is like, if they've done property work in a property, they've done property preservation on a house, or didn't do property preservation on a house in the north.
Right. Yeah.
You haven't looked at the property in 2 years, through 2 winters.
Yeah.
You have no key, you haven't winterized it?
Yeah. Somewhere in Michigan, or any, pick a state, Wisconsin, anything where it's going to freeze. You need to know that stuff. I have, again, way back when I was very first touring properties on some loans that I'd purchased way back then. I went into a property in Michigan, and the basement literally had 6 feet of water in it, where you could not get down in the basement. And, how were you going to know that, obviously, and had there been servicing notes at that time, I could have seen, it's been empty for this long and winterization never took place. Okay. So we've got a better idea of what's possible problems.
And it comes back to, if they're not paying a forced place insurance, right? And the borrower's not paying, is there no insurance on it at all? Is there insurance on it? And we always talk about there's 2 different kinds of insurances out there. Please watch our video before. That's a huge one, right? So knowing those kind of insights on the service notes. Yes, Jay, yes. It tells the story of the borrower. It tells the story of the loan itself, what's happened in the past. What interactions has the borrower not performing, but they've been talking to the servicer.
Yeah.
Or has this, I've seen service notes where it says borrower called and no response.
Yeah.
So the servicer didn't respond to a borrower call. To me, that means that, holy crap, this borrower wants to do something. And the servicer just did what they do, right? Yes. So it's huge. So servicing notes is something you cannot outsource. I would do it in-house. I would do it yourself, review it. You could probably teach a VA to do it. However, there's so many little caveats. We're like, oh, I wonder what happened here. Or, hey, look at this. The person died, but then who's this other person involved? Oh, they rented it out, or the daughter took over. What's going on? It tells you a huge story. They got a new job, all kind of stuff.
And it's hard to have that hired out and then get the full story.
Yes.
You're going to get somebody, let's say you hired a VA to go through that and make a few notes. That's fine, but how complete are those notes, and are they going to have the same effect as you're reading through and go, oh wait, so then if that happened, then what about this? And it can get you started on a different train of thought that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
Another myth that came to mind when I was talking this morning is that all sellers are the same.
I love those sellers too.
Right? Yes, Jay, you need to feel the nuances of the deal. All sellers are the same is something that I find humorous. It's a huge myth.
Huge.
I don't know if two sellers are the same at all.
I mean, just look at tapes.
One seller may not be the same tape from one tape to another.
No. And then you get my brother-in-law, the engineer, who's like, oh, and then you could just like automate the tapes that you get. I'm like, dude, no. I mean, possibly, but you'd have to convert all of them into one format before you could do any kind of analysis on that. So
we have a huge, one of the things I'll be adding in our 5-week class is my pivot table, which is probably invaluable. Since 2017, I think I started. I recorded every single header and basically normalized the whole list, so I can literally look up anything and say, okay, it means this. Granted, just last week had another tape where it was a header that came across, it was a misspelling. And is what it is, right? So yes.
But no two tapes are the same, no two sellers are the
same.
Seller to
seller is different. How they want to work it. Some sellers don't want you to counter. If you have an asset, you make an offer. Listen, we gave you the collateral file. It's a final offer. You have to lower your O&Es. Some sellers are very flexible with things. Some sellers won't give you servicing notes. Right. And some sellers are used to working with small investors, which makes it easier for us to work with them and make things happen a little bit easier and quicker. And some sellers will work with Nathan differently than they work with us.
Sure.
Right. I mean, we don't get the tapes anymore, right? We know who Nathan doesn't get the tapes and I do, right? Like, why? And it has nothing to do with who we are. It is what it is.
Well, and what I wrote down here was all sellers just want to screw you over. All they want to do is take a buck and leave. Very good set. Yeah.
Are all notes on sellers tapes bad? No,
not at all. Not at all. And having been on the other side of the table, and Dave, you know this, sellers often don't have all the information. And so when a buyer comes in and says, okay, well, I found this and this and this, and you're like, oh, really? I had no idea.
Yeah. We're not screwing, the seller's not screwing when they say they don't know most of the time.
Most of the time.
Yeah. Understand the fact that
the ones that are trying to screw you over, what we've learned over the years is the ones that do try to screw you over, they don't last long.
No.
So, it's not worth it for the sellers to be out there just like trying to mess everyone over and, sell you a bunch of crappy assets.
So if you're dealing with a seller who seems to be not sure what's going on, ask others. You're going to find out that people either know them already, that they're joker brokers, right? More likely. And understand the fact that sellers sometimes what most big sellers do, really big sellers do, is they'll buy a pool of say 100 assets, and they'll do 20 assets and send them out and sell off 20 for a profit to pay for the other 75.
Yeah.
Do it very often. And
Yeah,
sometimes
that's
they
really
put
common.
good stuff in there. Sometimes they just cut it down and they just make it happen.
Yeah.
And a little caveat, since this doesn't happen anymore, and I'm sure the gentleman doesn't, we won't mention names. There's some sellers out there that will send you a different tape, then they'll send somebody else. Right. For those who are part of our group that they know we're talking about, this is one of the reasons we started our little private group, that some sellers will send you a tape, send me a tape, and send someone else a tape, all different assets.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, and yeah, interesting. But anyway.
Yeah, and they rotate them, right? So sellers try doing anything they can to get the high prices, right? As much as they can to pay off other things. Also, it could be a fact of a sunset where deals may be sunsetting or the fund sunsetting, or where our IRR, we talked earlier, is projected on a 2-year. If we go 3 years, our IRR drops.
Right.
You have to sell 2 years to make that IRR work.
Yeah.
So we have to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And which is great. And I've definitely been the recipient of that, where a seller calls me up and says, hey, I've got these 2 loans. That's all that's left in the portfolio. I got to get rid of them. I can let them go for cheap. Absolutely. I'm your guy. It'd be a great
Every
deal.
day, twice on
Works.
Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm really glad that we talked about a lot of this stuff. And if there's other myths or questions, feel free to let us know. I'm curious where people are with this stuff.
Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of myths out there, but there's also a lot of truths. Vet your sellers as you would an investor. Yes. And let's clear something up, right? One of the biggest things we say is vet your sellers, vet your everyone else. Some people don't know what that means, right? And I'll tell you what it means to me. Vetting my seller means I reach out to the people I trust and ask if they know who they are. Do you know this person? And if a bunch of people don't know who they are, doesn't mean they're bad yet. Just means the fact they don't know them. Well, then I can dive in deeper. I look at the company. I look at their situation. Are they a large company, right? If they're a large company, then they're legit, right? If they're a small company, more likely they have no clue they're doing, right? You can look at the county records and see what's happened.
Yeah.
Right. If they're a small investor, most likely everyone has heard of them. They've probably done something to someone else. So that's my vetting process. However, most of the people I buy from, I repeat buy from them. I don't buy unless the single asset from one seller who said, listen, I originated a note.
Right. And I buy from both, but yeah, the repeat, when you get in with somebody and then you can buy from them over and over again, that's your best case scenario. And then you know them, they know you, and you know that, you've got a good working relationship. But it's important to be able to know who's the seller on this. I've got some that I bought like in 2015 that I still haven't resolved, where they sold the loans they shouldn't have. And I'm not sure that they actually knew that, but that's a different story. But we're still getting that resolved. And this is many years later, and they've had my money for this long, and hopefully that's being refunded very soon. We'll see.
And make sure, guys, if you see someone say, give me your money, I'll send you wired loans, it's actually legit. If you're at that point, you should already know if your seller's legit or not. And if they are legit, you should be able to trust that, right? Escrow is a big question mark in our space. And I get that for brick and mortar investors who used to escrow, but legitimate sellers, that's how they work.
In general, escrow still isn't widely used.
Nope.
I'm okay with that.
I mean, Jay, I bought properties from Jay before we bought a couple parcels with him, and there was no escrow. It was wire money over and be done with it, right? Because the trust is there. For new investors, that's kind of weird. You're trusting this person that you emailed back and forth, you haven't met, probably haven't talked to, and whatnot. Well, guys, I hate to cut it off there. I would say that this is a really cool, fun topic, and I really hope that we can do this again. I'd love to get more myths and facts.
I've got more on my list, so we'll have to do another round and talk about some more.
We won't be together for the next couple weeks. We have some things on our agenda, so we double backed it up. It's gonna be getting a little crazy, but we'd love for you guys to take a look at. We posted into the chat box, the comment box, the 5-week that we're coming up with. Please take a look at that. Even if you're experienced, The resources available in there are gonna be probably unheard of. I was talking to someone the other day that was part of a big training program, and some of the resources we're sharing isn't there. And there's a reason why we can't share some of the resources publicly, but we're gonna give it to the group, then they jump in there, so.
A lot of it is our private stuff. This is what we use on our own business. And
Yes.
just so we don't normally share that kind of thing. We're going to share it now.
Yes. And as a reminder, DME will be kicking off in June.
Yeah.
The site will be updated shortly if you missed in the beginning.
It's in process.
Yes.
Go and check it out.
It's in
Understand
Nashville
it's not totally done
next
yet.
June. So if you're looking, I'll do it for Nathan. If you want to sponsor anything, please reach out to him.
Yeah.
I'm not involved in the organization of this, but reach out to Nathan, set up some sponsorships if you're looking to do that,
Yeah.
and he'll arrange for a speaking point. So
It's going to be a lot of fun. We've got a lot of cool things, fun things
Yeah.
planned. So
there's a cool,
Stay
and get
tuned.
there the night before. Make sure you get there the night before for axe throwing,
Absolutely.
which is gonna be
Yeah.
fun.
yeah,
So,
it'll be a lot of fun. We'll have more information
yes.
as we go. But yeah,
Awesome.
stay tuned.
Well, guys, I appreciate you guys tuning in on this Friday afternoon. We'll be back probably at the end of October. And let us know if you have any questions, if there's anything going on or curiosities that's happening. There's a lot of curiosity about default loans and stuff like that. Don't get too excited about that. Understand the fact that a lot of the stuff is held by the federal government. Fannie and Freddie, you're not going to get those loans that are defaulting. I know there's a lot of articles about that. So just be careful what you read. That loans are defaulting like crazy doesn't mean they're trickling down to you anytime in the next 6 months. Those are probably be pushed out a little bit longer. So, all right. Well, Nathan, thanks for joining.
Hey, thank you. Yeah.
We'll be talking, I'm sure, soon. And again, 23rd of October will be Tuesday nights. We'll be jumping on at 8 o'clock. We'll hope to
Yeah.
talk to everyone then.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.